Venomous snakes are passed hand to hand in secret Appalachian churches, and people die proving their faith. Southeast Asia black magic rituals are carried out in hidden ceremonies, and ancient angel summoning ceremonies are carried out in secret, using a language only the participants can understand. These are forbidden rituals that are still practiced in secret. There are churches in Appalachia where people handle venomous snakes during service. Talking about rattlesnakes, copperheads, cobras. They grab them, pass them around, all while singing and praying. They believe that if your faith is strong enough, you won't get bitten. But people do get bitten. People have died doing this. The practice comes from an interpretation of Mark 16:17-18, which says, amongst other things, that believers will pick up serpents and not be harmed. It also says people who believe can drink deadly poison and not get harmed, but that's kind of taking things a little too far. Still, this practice is illegal in a lot of states, so some churches hide it. They'll hold services in forests or abandoned buildings. Some families have been doing this for generations. Black magic is still actively practiced in parts of Southeast Asia, especially in countries like Thailand. People perform these rituals to contact spirits, seek protection, try to influence events in their lives. The ceremonies usually involve chants, offerings, sometimes animal sacrifices. They're almost always done in complete secrecy. Some people do it for protection, others to curse their enemies. Learning the rituals takes years. Every step is taken very seriously. Most people only hear about these practices through rumors or secondhand stories because you're not just going to stumble into one of these ceremonies. There's a whole underground network of practitioners, but they're not advertising their services. You have to know somebody, and even then, you might not get invited. Enochian magic was created back in the late 1500s by John Dee, who was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I and his assistant Edward Kelly. They claimed they communicated with angels who gave them this entire language and details about rituals designed to summon celestial beings. The rituals require very specific tools: holy table covered in engraved symbols, crystal or scrying mirrors, and detailed verbal commands spoken in the Enochian language. The ceremonies are incredibly structured with very specific prayers, invocations, sigils, all done in a certain sequence. Dee wrote everything down in journals that still exist today, so unlike a lot of the other stuff on this list, we actually have exact instructions on how to perform these rituals. Later on, occult groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn picked it up, and Aleister Crowley experimented with it in the early 1900s. Modern practitioners still use Dee's original system. Some sessions last hours, some last days. It's considered one of the most complex occult systems. The fact that it survived over 400 years comes down to two things: Dee's extremely detailed documentation and the intensive training required to actually do it right. You can't just wing this stuff. Bohemian Grove is this private men's club in Northern California. Every summer, members including businessmen, politicians, and famous people gather in the forest for a 2-week retreat. The main ritual is called the Cremation of Care. Members wear robes, they carry this 8-foot effigy called Doll Care, and then burn it in front of a massive concrete owl statue. The ceremony happens at night with fire and chanting. The owl statue is added in the 1920s and supposedly represents wisdom. The effigy burning is meant to symbolize letting go of your worries during the retreat. Now, the club insists there are no actual human sacrifices, but there have always been rumors that darker stuff goes on, because, why is it all kept so secret? What I described is really just a rumor. We still can't say for sure what goes on in there. Not only that, but you gotta be a pretty influential or famous person to get an invite, so it all feels highly suspect. Photographs leaked over the years that show rows of men in red robes and the giant owl looming above them. It's pretty eerie stuff. Security is incredibly tight. Only members and their guests get in, and cameras are totally forbidden. After Japan banned Christianity in 1614, followers had to go completely underground. They're called Kakure Karishiten, or hidden Christians. To avoid persecution, they adapted their faith to blend with Shinto and Buddhist practices. Statues of the Virgin Mary were disguised to look like Kannon, the Buddhist goddess of mercy. Prayers were rewritten to sound like Buddhist chants, but still had Latin or Portuguese words hidden in them. Communities developed secret rituals and objects: hidden crosses, small painted tablets used in private ceremonies. These practices got passed down from parents to children, sometimes for multiple generations. And here's something interesting: even after the ban was lifted in 1873, many families actually chose to keep their own version of the faith instead of joining the official Catholic Church. They preserved the rituals, the prayers, the symbols for decades, often hiding them in everyday objects while using coded language. And today, only a handful of communities still practice this way. Some reports say there could be fewer than 100 active practitioners left. The Odd Fellows are one of the oldest fraternal organizations in the world, around since at least the 1700s. They've always had these cryptic rituals that involve real human skeletons. No, not replicas, actual human bones. In some lodges, especially back in the day, new members would be brought into a dark room with a coffin and bones. The idea was to remind you that life is short, but brotherhood is eternal. Members take oaths, they wear robes, they go through different levels. Each level has its own initiation with its own weird little traditions that outsiders never hear about. But the Odd Fellows hide in plain sight. They've got buildings in towns all over the US and Europe. Most people walk past those buildings every day. Never think twice about what's happening inside. The organization still exists today, and some of the older traditions, like the use of skeletons, are still part of it. The Knights Templar show up in almost every conspiracy theory ever conjured up, but what doesn't get talked about much are the initiation rituals they were accused of doing. A lot of this came out in 1307 when the Templars were arrested. Some members confessed to some pretty bizarre stuff, like spitting on the cross and worshipping a mysterious head called Baphomet. It's hard to know how much of this stuff is true. There are also rumors about them kissing each other. Anyway, the confessions came under brutal torment, so some of it was probably just made up on the spot in desperation to stop the pain. But the rituals were supposedly designed to strip away a recruit's old beliefs and make them completely loyal to the order. They had to prove your obedience, no matter how uncomfortable things got. And over time, the Templars got a reputation for holding secret knowledge and practicing something that looked a lot like occultism. Some people think modern secret societies borrowed their rituals and symbolism from the Templars. One thing's clear though, whatever was happening in those ceremonies, it probably wasn't just a standard oath and a handshake. The Templars were disbanded and many were executed, but the stories about the rituals have lasted over 700 years. Skull and Bones at Yale is a secretive group that's produced presidents, CIA directors, and powerful businessmen. They have a very demented initiation ceremony. It happens inside their private clubhouse called the Tomb. There are no windows, no outside access, and almost zero information about what actually goes on. But details leak out occasionally, and what people describe as kind of creepy. New members are brought into a dimly lit room, laid inside a coffin, and surrounded by older members in robes. While inside, they're pressured to reveal their darkest, most personal secrets. Some reports say there's a human skull involved somehow. The whole point is to build loyalty by making sure everyone has dirt on everyone else. Loyalty through blackmail, basically. Once you've handed over your secrets, you're tied to the group for life. Members rarely talk about what happened, even decades later. And when you look at how many of them end up running major institutions, it really makes you wonder what kind of deals were sealed inside that coffin. The society still operates today with about 50 new members chosen each year. They call themselves bonesmen. This is one of those things that's just genuinely hard to wrap your head around. Sati was the practice in India where widows were expected to throw themselves onto their husband's funeral pyre and burn alive. It was framed as loyalty and devotion, but most of the time women were forced into it. It was officially banned in 1829, but that didn't fully stop it. The most well-known modern case happened in 1987 in a small village. An 18-year-old widow named Rup Kanwar was burned alive on her husband's pyre. She'd only been married 8 months when her husband, Mal Singh Shekhawat, died at 24. The next day, thousands gathered as Rup was burned alive. Afterward, people in the village called her Sati Mata, meaning pure mother, and built a shrine where they offered coconuts in her honor. The outrage that followed spread across India and pushed the government to act. In 1988, the Commission of Sati Prevention Act made it illegal not just to perform the ritual, but to glorify it. 45 people were charged, including politicians and Rup's in-laws, but over the years, every single one was acquitted. Final 8 were cleared as recently as October of 2024. And the Order of the Nine Angels started in Britain in the 60s. It mixes Satanism with old pagan and occult practices. Members are told to test their limits, even through violence or crime, to prove their strength. They work in tiny underground cells called nexions. There's no single leader or headquarters. Some of their writings talk about human sacrifice, infiltrating institutions, which has gotten them tied to real criminal cases over the years. And it's hard to tell how much of it is serious and organized versus a bunch of weirdos trying to sound and act edgy, but they definitely do exist. There are guidebooks, initiation ranks, coded texts floating around online, all tied to the same group, and no one really knows how far it goes. All that said though, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.